comments? We are not supposed to interpret the Quran, but we are supposed to reflect upon its meanings. Please clarify. A great deal of the Quran is about reflection. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ وَإِلى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ فَذَكِّرْ. Haven't they looked at the camel, how it was created? Haven't they looked at the heavens, how they've been raised up? Haven't they looked at the mountains, how they've been placed, standing firm? Haven't they looked at the earth and how we have stretched it out? So remind them. Those are things to think about. You don't need to interpret those verses. They're very clear. Much of the Quran is very clear. However, when the Quran says something like, if you fear disobedience or incalcitrance from your spouse, then warn her, abandon the bed, and then strike her, you're not allowed to interpret that. It is haram for you to interpret that. Nor can you apply that ruling in your house because it's in the Quran. It is haram for you to do that. Muslims have always believed that. You need to ask scholars the interpretation of that verse, and then you're surprised to find out it actually doesn't mean what you probably thought it meant. And that's what I mean by not interpreting the Quran. Those are the verses that deal with actual behavior. In those verses, you must go to scholars because you might completely misunderstand it. For instance, ghiba. The Quran says, لَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Don't let some of you backbite about others. You have to understand there's a ruling. There's 7 situations in which that law does not apply. Then you have to know the definition of backbiting. You might think it means speaking about things that aren't true. On the contrary, it means things that are true. So you have to understand, and that comes from scholars, it comes from people that understand the Quran. So that's what I mean. But verses in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, that in the creation of the heavens and the earth, alternating of the night and the day are signs for people who have deep reflection, people of innermost core. You can reflect on that. I mean, the Quran's filled with things, so you can read it for that. Don't try to derive rulings from it. That's all. That's all it means. Don't derive rulings. It's very important. Anything else? Normative is what the religion says about itself. It's not telling you how Muslims behave. It's telling you how they're supposed to behave. And that is a much fairer way of looking at a religion, is to look at the ideal and not the reality. So Sayyid Hussein Nasr wrote a book called Islam, Ideals and Realities. In every tradition you have ideals and you have realities. America has an ideal, freedom, liberty, and justice for all. That's a beautiful ideal. We can all agree with that. Unfortunately, that has not been the reality of America. Intelligent Americans are the first to admit that, but there does seem to be an attempt. And certainly the Civil War is an example of that. The freeing of the slaves in this country, the civil rights. It's taken a long time to get to things that Islam arrived at 1400 years ago, but there's an effort. So ideals and realities are very different. The Geneva Convention is beautiful ideals about how to treat prisoners of war. The reality is prisoners of war are treated like animals and worse than animals all the time. And sensory deprivation is torture. It's called passive torture, and it actually drives people insane. In some Christian texts, it says descendants of Isaac were great people and descendants of Ishmael caused great havoc on the earth. Not true. There's good in both the sons. And there's some bad offspring that came out of there, but you can't blame the parents for what... You can sometimes blame them for what their children do, if they were neglectful. But you can't blame them for what their grandchildren do. That's not their fault.